I was still holding the spatula when I saw the message. It was a Sunday morning in late October, just past 8:30, the kind of morning where the light comes in flat and gray through the kitchen window and everything feels slower than it should. Marcus had left the house 40 minutes earlier, same as every Sunday for the past 4 months. Same excuse, same kiss on the forehead that landed somewhere between the corner of my eye and my hairline. I was making eggs I didn't really want when his phone buzzed on the counter. He'd forgotten it again. I looked at the screen without touching it. The name lit up in the notification bar, and I knew that name the way I knew my own handwriting. Had known it my whole life, would have recognized it in the dark. It was my sister. I stood there with the spatula in my hand and the eggs going cold in the pan, and I read the preview text before the screen went dark. "Are you on your way? I made breakfast." Like that first time. I read it once. I read it again. Like that first time. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up with what my eyes had just done. My hands went cold the way they do when something is wrong, before you can name what's wrong. That animal knowing, the body's early warning system that the mind spends so much energy overriding. I set the spatula down on the counter, and I picked up his phone with 2 fingers. The way you pick up something you're not sure is safe to touch. It wasn't locked. Marcus never locked his phone. He said he had nothing to hide. I opened the conversation, and there it was. Not one message. Months of messages. I scrolled up slowly, each screen a different kind of damage, until I found a photo she'd sent him on a Wednesday afternoon in August. A Wednesday when I was at work, when I was in a meeting about Q3 projections, when I was existing in the version of my life where none of this was happening. And the caption underneath it said only, "Missing you." I put the phone down on the counter. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood in my kitchen in the gray October light, and I felt something shift inside me. Some tectonic thing, quiet and total and completely irreversible. 10 minutes later, I heard his key in the front door. He'd come back for the phone he forgot. He walked into the kitchen and found me standing there with his phone on the counter between us and the conversation with my sister still open on the screen. He looked at me. He looked at the phone. And he didn't say a word. But for you to understand what I actually lost in that moment, the full weight of it, the part that isn't about him at all, I have to tell you who my sister was to me before any of this. I have to go back to the beginning. My name is Patrice. I'm 36 years old. I'm a registered nurse, and for the past 4 years I've been a charge nurse on the cardiac step-down unit at a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. I built that career one overnight shift at a time. One license exam, one hard year after another. I'm proud of it in the way you're only proud of things you bled for. Until 16 months ago, I also considered myself one of the luckiest people I knew. Not because my life was easy, but because I had Danielle. Danielle is 2 years younger than me. We grew up together in Greensboro, North Carolina, in a house that was too small for the 4 of us. Me, Danielle, our mother, and the rotating cast of our mother's financial problems. Our father left before Danielle was old enough to remember him clearly, which meant I remembered him just clearly enough to explain to her why he wasn't coming back. That explanation, delivered at age 9 to a 7-year-old sitting on the edge of the bathtub, was the first time I understood what it meant to be someone's older sister. You protect them from the sharp edges. You put your body between them and the thing that's going to hurt. I did that for 27 years. I remember a night when Danielle was 17 and I was 19, home from my first semester of nursing school, and she came into my room at 2 in the morning because she'd had a panic attack and didn't want to wake our mother. She sat on the floor next to my bed, and I sat next to her on the floor, and we stayed there until 4 a.m., until the shaking stopped, until she could breathe evenly and tell me it was passing. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I wasn't even tired. I just stayed there next to her on the floor, because that was what you did. That was what I believed sisters did. She was the first person I called when I got my nursing license, the first person I called when I got the Charlotte job, the first person I called when Marcus proposed. There's one memory I keep coming back to when I try to understand the shape of what I lost. I was 28 years old, in my 3rd year as a floor nurse, and I had made a medication error, a small one. Caught in time, no patient harm, but the kind of thing that strips a nurse down to the floor regardless of outcome, because you understand exactly what could have happened. I drove to my car after my shift and sat in the parking garage and couldn't start the engine. I called Danielle. She didn't tell me it was fine. She didn't minimize it. She said, "Tell me what happened, start to finish." And I did. And she listened to the whole thing, every detail. And when I finished, she said, "You caught it. You did the right thing next. That's what matters." Then she stayed on the phone with me until I could start the car. That was the sister I knew, the one who let things be as serious as they were, and then helped you figure out what you did next. I don't know how to reconcile that person with the person who sat in my kitchen drinking coffee with my husband while I was at work taking care of other people's lives. I have stopped trying to reconcile them into one coherent story. I think they were both real. I think people are capable of being both things, genuinely loving in some moments and genuinely harmful in others. And I think understanding that is part of what it means to survive something like this and come out the other side still able to trust your own history, still able to say, what was good and what was bad. And both of those things can be true at the same time without canceling each other out. Marcus. I need to tell you about Marcus. I met him at a colleague's housewarming in the spring of 2019. He was a physical therapist, 39 years old, easygoing in a way that felt earned rather than performed. He laughed at things that were actually funny. He remembered small details, what you ordered the last time, what you'd said you were worried about the week before. He made me feel paid attention to in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I called Danielle that same night. I was still in my car in the parking lot of the restaurant where a group of us had gone after the party, and I sat there for 45 minutes telling her everything. The way he'd laughed, what we'd talked about, the fact that he'd texted me before I even got home. She said, "Patrice, that's it. That's your person." I told her I didn't know yet. She said, "I do." We got married in September of 2021, an outdoor ceremony in the mountains outside Asheville. Danielle was my maid of honor. She stood to my left the entire ceremony, close enough that I could feel her shoulder against mine, and when Marcus said his vows, she reached over without looking at me and squeezed my hand once, just once. I have a photo of that moment, her hand on mine, my face turned toward Marcus, both of us crying without knowing the other one was crying. I don't know what to do with that photo now. I haven't thrown it away. I haven't been able to look at it either. I didn't know yet that I was living the last days of a version of my life that I would never be able to get back. Type in the comments, "A sister who betrays you was never your sister." If someone who should have had your back left a knife in it instead, leave that comment and subscribe to this channel, because what I'm about to tell you is the part nobody warns you about. The signs were there. Every single one of them was there, and I assembled every possible alternative explanation for each one because the truth was not something I was willing to pick up and carry. The first sign was in February of 2022, 5 months after the wedding. Marcus was invited to a bachelor party weekend in Nashville for a college friend. He mentioned it to me 2 weeks in advance, showed me the itinerary, asked if I was okay with it. I said, of course. I worked that Friday and Saturday, a weekend run of 12-hour shifts, and I came home Sunday evening to our apartment tired and ready for quiet. Danielle called me that Sunday night. We talked for over an hour, the way we always did. At some point, she said casually, "How was your weekend?" I said long. I'd been at the hospital both days. She said, "Oh, right, Marcus was in Nashville." And then she caught herself. I heard it, a half beat of silence, and she said, "You mentioned that, didn't you? A few weeks ago." I hadn't mentioned it. I was almost certain I hadn't mentioned it, but I told myself maybe I had, maybe in passing, maybe I forgot. I filed it in the back of my mind and moved on. The second sign came in April. Danielle had gone through a rough breakup the previous fall. A man named Derek she'd been with for almost 3 years. The breakup was legitimately hard, and I had made myself available for it the way I always had, the way she'd done for me. She started coming to Charlotte more often, staying over on weekends, spending time at our apartment while I worked long shifts. Marcus was warm with her, kind, attentive in the way he was attentive with everyone. I told him once, in bed on a Sunday night, that I was grateful for how patient he was with Danielle during this stretch. He said, "She's your family, Patrice. That means she's mine too." I thought that was a beautiful thing to say. I have thought about those words a great deal since then. One Friday in April, I came home from a double shift at 11 at night, and they were both in the living room. Marcus on one end of the couch, Danielle on the other, a show running on the television at low volume. the kind of comfortable quiet that takes time to build. There was nothing wrong with the scene. Nothing a rational person would look at and identify as a problem. Two adults watching television, but Danielle looked up at me when I walked in, and there was something in her face in that first fraction of a second before she smiled, something that wasn't quite welcome, something closer to the look of a person who has been settled into a space and has just been interrupted in it. It lasted less than a heartbeat. Then she smiled and said, "Patrice, you look exhausted. Come sit down." I sat down. I told myself I was too tired to see straight. The third sign was in July, and it was the one that lived in my chest like a splinter I couldn't locate. The three of us were having dinner together at our apartment on a Thursday. Somewhere in the conversation, Marcus mentioned that he'd been stressed about a patient, a difficult rehabilitation case, a man who kept refusing to do the exercises that were slowing his recovery, the frustration of watching someone work against their own healing. I had talked about this exact case with Danielle the week before. I had described the patient's history, the specific injury, the way Marcus was losing sleep over it. In the middle of dinner, before I said anything, Danielle said, "Is this the guy with the L4 to L5 fusion? The one who keeps stopping the stretches?" Marcus looked up. "How do you know about that?" She didn't skip a beat. She looked directly at me. "Patrice told me." Marcus looked at me. I looked back at him, and I thought, did I tell her that? Did I give her that specific detail? I remembered telling her Marcus had a difficult patient. I did not remember telling her L4 to L5. That was the kind of medical specificity I usually kept to myself. But maybe I had. Maybe I was wrong about what I'd said. I smiled. Dinner continued. I told myself I was imagining things. The fourth sign happened in September. Marcus told me he had a 2-day continuing education conference in Raleigh, Wednesday and Thursday. He'd stay over Wednesday night, come back Thursday evening. Routine. He'd done conferences before. I'd done conferences before. We were two working adults with careers that occasionally required us to be elsewhere. That Thursday, my coworker and closest friend at the hospital, a nurse named Tamara, texted me at 2 in the afternoon. "Hey, random question. Did Marcus say he was going to Raleigh this week?" I said yes. Conference. She went quiet for a bit. Then, "Okay, I'm going to ask you something and I need you not to panic. Can you call me on your break?" I called her from the stairwell 15 minutes later. She told me she'd been at Crabtree Valley Mall in Raleigh the previous afternoon, Tuesday, the day before Marcus's conference was supposed to start, running an errand for her mother. She'd seen a couple walking ahead of her in the parking garage. The woman had turned her head at one point, enough for Tamara to see her profile. "Patrice," she said. "I'm pretty sure it was Danielle." "With who?" I said, though some part of me already knew the answer. "With Marcus." The silence on both ends lasted a while. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I was about 30 feet behind them," she said. "She was wearing that yellow jacket, the one she had at your birthday dinner. Danielle has a yellow jacket. She's had it for years. She was wearing it at my birthday dinner in August." I told Tamara I'd look into it. I thanked her. I went back to my shift. I finished the next 4 hours of that shift on muscle memory alone. Then I went home, sat down on the edge of our bed, and finally allowed myself to open every drawer I had been closing for 8 months. I had not told Danielle about the Nashville trip. I was certain of it now. She had known because he had told her, because they were already, in whatever form, in contact in a way that I didn't know about. And then, sitting on the edge of that bed, a memory surfaced that I had been sitting on since the beginning without knowing what it meant. 3 months before I met Marcus, in the winter of 2018, Danielle had gone to a holiday party thrown by a mutual friend in Durham. She'd come home talking about it in vague terms. Nothing specific, just that it had been fun. Good crowd. She'd met some interesting people. She never mentioned any names. 3 months later, I met Marcus at a housewarming in Charlotte. I called Danielle from the parking lot, excited, describing him. PT, late 30s, Greensboro originally, had been in Charlotte for 6 years. And she said, "A Pete, that's interesting." Just that. And then she asked what he looked like. She already knew him. She had met him at that Durham party 3 months earlier. She had been holding that knowledge the entire time I fell in love with him, the entire time I called her describing dates and conversations, and the feeling of being chosen by someone for the first time in a long time. She had listened. She had encouraged me. and she had kept her own history with him folded up small and put away somewhere I couldn't see it. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time. Then I got up and started making a list. Before I tell you what I did next, I want to know, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them right away? Or would you have waited? Drop it in the comments below. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, now is the time. Because what I did next is the part that changed everything. I did not confront Marcus that night, or the next night, or the night after that. I am a nurse. I have spent 15 years learning how to stay functional in the middle of a crisis, how to keep my hands steady and my voice even when the monitors are alarming and there are 3 things happening at once and only one of them can be addressed first. I applied every one of those 15 years to the 2 weeks that followed Tamara's phone call. Triage. Prioritize. Do not let your face tell a story your plan isn't ready for. During the day, I went to work and I did my job and I was good at it because my patients needed me to be and because I am not someone who lets personal catastrophe bleed into the professional spaces where other people are depending on me. I triaged chest pain, I managed drip rates, I updated family members in waiting rooms with the calm voice I have practiced for a decade and a half. At night, I came home and I made dinner, and I asked Marcus about his day, and I listened to his answers, and I watched him the way you watch a patient whose presentation isn't quite adding up yet, quietly, systematically, cataloging everything, storing it for later. He noticed nothing. That is either a testament to my training or an indictment of his attention. I have stopped trying to decide which. The morning after Tamara's call, on my way into a 7 a.m. shift, I pulled into the parking lot of a gas station 2 blocks from the hospital, sat in the car with the engine off, and I called my mother. That was the hardest phone call I have ever made in my life. Not because I was afraid of her reaction. My mother is a woman who raised 2 daughters alone through circumstances that would have unraveled someone less grounded, and she has never once made me feel like her strength was conditional on things going well. She does not fall apart. But because calling her meant converting into spoken words what I had been carrying in silence, and as long as it lived only inside me, there was still some corner of the possible world where Danielle was who I had always believed she was. The moment I said it out loud, that corner closed forever. My mother listened without interrupting. I talked for almost 20 minutes in that gas station parking lot, watching a man fill his tank and drive away and another car pull in, the ordinary morning moving around me while I dismantled something that had taken 34 years to build. When I finished, my mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very steady, "Patrice, are you somewhere safe right now?" I told her I was in a parking lot. She said, "Okay, stay there. I'm calling you back in 10 minutes. She called back in 8. By the time we hung up, 45 minutes later, 2 things had happened. She had said what I needed to hear. I am on your side. Not in the middle. On your side. And I had felt the specific relief of being known by someone who chooses you without hesitation, and I had let myself feel it, and then I had tucked it away carefully, because I needed it later and I didn't want to use it up in a parking lot before my shift. That afternoon, on my lunch break, I called the family law attorney whose name I had written in my phone over a year earlier, when I'd watched a colleague navigate her divorce with a composure I had deeply admired. I made an appointment for the following week. The conversation was practical and quick. We had been married less than 2 years. Our finances were largely separate. Individual accounts, shared household bills split evenly, and the apartment lease had my name and only my name on it as the primary tenant. I had signed it 3 years before we married, and when Marcus moved in, I had added him as a co-occupant, a distinction that now mattered enormously. The apartment was mine, had always been mine. I began separating what was mine from what was ours with the same methodical care I bring to anything I do not want to get wrong. I changed my direct deposit back to my individual account. I made a complete copy of the shared document drawer, tax returns going back 3 years, the lease, our insurance policies, the marriage certificate, and put those copies in the locked drawer of my locker at the hospital. I went through my phone and saved screenshots of every message from Danielle over the past 6 months that I hadn't thought to archive before, because even if I couldn't prove everything I now knew, I wanted a record of the texture of those months. I texted Tamara and asked her to write down in an email to herself, date-stamped, time-stamped, everything she had seen and heard and when. She sent it within 45 minutes. No questions, no drama, just done. That is exactly who Tamara is, and I have thought about her steadiness during that period more times than I can count. Over the following week, I continued to live in the apartment alongside Marcus as if none of it had changed. I cooked dinner, I watched television, I answered when he spoke to me. I was present enough that nothing alarmed him and absent enough that I was accumulating what I needed. On the Thursday of that week, I packed a bag, just essentials, the things I'd want for a week away, and put it in the trunk of my car. A nurse packs a go bag. It's a habit. You learn that emergencies don't give notice. The Tuesday before the Sunday Marcus forgot his phone, Danielle came by the apartment. She stopped by sometimes without much advance notice. She had a key, because that is what you give family when the trust has been decades in the building. I was working a late shift. She had texted earlier to say she might stop and drop off a book she'd borrowed from my shelf months ago. A perfectly ordinary reason. A perfectly ordinary visit. Marcus was home. I know she was there because of the mug. When I came in after midnight, still in my scrubs, my feet aching in the specific way they ache after 10 hours of cardiac care, I went to the kitchen for water. 2 mugs were in the drying rack. My mug, the one I use every morning, the one Marcus knows is mine, was where it always was. The second mug was not mine. It was from the back cabinet, the shelf where we kept the guest mugs, the ones that only came out when company was over. He had made her coffee. They had sat in my kitchen, in my apartment, drinking from my mugs, while I was at work taking care of people who needed me. I picked up that second mug, and I put it back in the cabinet, and I went to bed, and I did not say a single word. 2 days later, Marcus forgot his phone. He walked in and found me standing in the kitchen with the screen still lit in my hand. He looked at me. He looked at the phone, and he did what weak men do when they are caught. He went silent. Not the silence of someone choosing their words. The silence of someone whose words have all run out at once. I said, very quietly, I know about Raleigh, I know about Durham, I know about the party where you met her before I ever introduced you. I paused. The attorney already has my information. He opened his mouth. Marcus, I said, don't. I picked up the bag I had packed 2 days earlier. I had packed it 2 days earlier. A go bag, a habit from years of being a person who prepares for emergencies, and I walked out the front door of the apartment that was in my name. That was the last time I slept under the same roof as my husband. It was the moment I understood what I was actually losing. Not the marriage, the sister who never was. I want to be honest with you about what the months that followed were like, because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering at this point. They were the hardest months of my adult life. That's not a dramatic statement. It's just accurate. And I don't have any interest in dressing it up differently than it was. There were nights in the apartment after I came back to it, after Marcus had collected his things over one uncomfortable Saturday afternoon and gone, when I would sit on the couch in the quiet, and the absence of him would be there but manageable, a weight I could feel the shape of, that I understood, that was already beginning the slow process of becoming something I could live alongside. And then I would think about Danielle, and that was a different thing entirely. That was a grief that didn't follow any road I had traveled before. Marcus had been my husband for less than 2 years. Danielle had been my sister for 34 years. She had been the person I protected from sharp edges, the person I explained things to when they were too heavy to carry alone, the person I stayed awake with on bedroom floors in the middle of the night. Every single memory I had of feeling fully known by another human being, not performed for, not managed, but actually known, had Danielle somewhere in the frame. She hadn't just taken something from me. She had changed the meaning of everything that came before it. That is the specific wound of a sibling's betrayal that no one prepares you for, and that is almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't been inside it. You don't just lose the relationship, you lose your history. You have to go back through 34 years of memories and decide one by one what was real. And you cannot decide with certainty. That is the part that doesn't resolve. You can accept what happened, you can move forward, you can build something new, and there will still be a room in your mind where those memories live and where the question of their realness never fully settles. Tamara was present for all of it in the way that some people are present, not by saying the right thing, but by simply not going anywhere. She showed up the week I came back to the apartment with takeout Thai food and an offer to help me rearrange the furniture. It was her idea, not mine. She said, "You need the room to feel different." She was right. We moved the couch 90 degrees and put the bookshelf on the other wall and brought a lamp from the bedroom into the living room. And it helped in a way I didn't fully understand at the time and understand completely now. You cannot undo what happened in a space, but you can change what the space looks like, and that matters more than it should. She sat with me on that rearranged couch that night and didn't ask me to explain myself or perform any version of being okay. She just stayed. That is a harder skill than it looks. My mother stopped speaking to Danielle within a week of my telling her. Not with a dramatic confrontation. My mother does not operate that way, has never in her life needed to raise her voice to make her position clear. She simply became unavailable. When Danielle called twice in October, my mother responded to one with a single text, "I love you, but I can't pretend nothing happened." Danielle did not call again after that. My mother has never asked me to reconcile. She has never said, "She's still your sister," or, "At some point you're going to have to let this go," or any of the things that people who are not inside a situation say to the people who are. She has simply been on my side, fully and without conditions, and I did not know until I needed it how rare that is, or how much it matters. The legal process concluded in under 5 months. No contested property, no children, no shared accounts to untangle. The apartment stayed in my name. Marcus moved out by the 1st of December and signed the final paperwork before the new year. He was civil about it. No dramatics, no attempts to relitigate what had happened. I think he knew. I think somewhere in there he understood that what he had done was indefensible, and that knowledge, while it did not make him a better man, at least made him a cooperative one at the end. Danielle and Marcus lasted 7 months together. My mother heard through family channels the specific gravitational pull of information through a family network that it had ended quietly in the early spring, that Marcus had ended it, that Danielle had moved back to Greensboro, into a rental room in a house near where we grew up. She left me a voicemail in May, 3 minutes and 42 seconds. I listened to the first 60 seconds, her voice unsteady, the words, "I'm so sorry and I need you to know," and then I stopped the playback. I have not deleted it. I have not listened to the rest. That decision belongs to me, on my own schedule, for my own reasons, and I am protecting it the way I have learned to protect the things that are mine. I have no interest in her suffering. I also have no obligation to absorb it. I need to stop here and talk directly to you, not about Marcus, not about Danielle, about the thing underneath all of it that I spent a long time trying to find the right words for, and that I think matters beyond my specific story. When someone outside your family betrays you, you lose a relationship. When your sister betrays you with your partner, you lose a relationship and you lose a framework. You lose the organizing structure through which you understood who you were, what you deserved, and what it meant to be known by another person. You lose your own narrative. I had spent 34 years inside a story where one of the central facts was, I have a sister who loves me, and I love her, and whatever else happens in the world, that is a constant. That story was the ground I stood on. It was the thing I measured other losses against. When relationships ended, when I was scared, when I didn't know what came next, Danielle was the stability point. She was the reference, the baseline, the place I called from. Finding out that the constant had been something else, or at minimum, that the person I had trusted most in my life had been capable of something I couldn't have anticipated, didn't just remove the relationship. It removed the ground. And grieving the ground is different from grieving the thing on top of it. It takes longer. It doesn't follow a shape that other people recognize. It doesn't respond to the same timelines or the same reassurances. I want to name something specific about what Danielle did, because I think naming it is useful for anyone who is in this story right now and hasn't found the words yet. She used intimacy as intelligence. Every time I told her Marcus was difficult that week, she filed it. Every time I said I was feeling insecure about whether I was giving enough in the marriage, she recorded it. Every time I was vulnerable with her, about my fears, about my doubts, about the moments when I felt like I wasn't sure I was getting it right, she was building a map, a precise map of where I was fragile, where I was uncertain, where there was space that could be widened. And this is the part that doesn't get said enough. That map was built entirely out of things I gave her freely and willingly, because I loved her and I thought she was safe. She did not extract that information. I offered it. I called her from parking lots. I told her things at midnight. I trusted her with the inside of my life because that is what sisters are for. Because that is what I had always believed, because she had given me every reason to believe it for 34 years. And she used it. That is the specific injury of betrayal by a sibling. It is not just that she did something wrong. It is that she did it with the tools my love put into her hands. There is something I want to say about warning signs. For anyone who may be watching this and recognizing something, some feeling you've been filing away, some discomfort you've been explaining, pay attention to how the people close to you handle the information you give them, not whether they seem trustworthy. We are all very skilled at seeming trustworthy. Pay attention to what they do with what you share. Does what you tell them in private appear later in places it shouldn't? Does a person who has access to your vulnerabilities seem to get more present and attentive exactly when your relationship is going through a hard stretch? Does someone know details about your partner that you didn't give them? The instinct that something is off is not paranoia. It is your nervous system working exactly the way it is supposed to work. It is pattern recognition, your brain collecting data across time and presenting you with a conclusion you don't want to draw. You do not have to wait for proof before you take that information seriously. You do not have to have evidence before you create distance. You are allowed to act on what you know before you can demonstrate it. And I want to say something about forgiveness directly, because I know there is someone listening to this who is being pressured right now by a mother, an aunt, a grandmother, a mutual friend, to make things easier for the person who did this to them. Forgiving someone and reconciling with them are two entirely different acts, and conflating them is how victims end up doing the emotional labor of normalizing what was done to them. Forgiveness is internal. It is something you do inside yourself, for your own nervous system, your own sleep, your own ability to move through the world without carrying the weight of active hatred. You can forgive someone completely, truly release the rage and the bitterness, and still never speak to them again. You can forgive your sister and not return her calls. You can forgive someone and maintain a boundary that protects you. Those two things are not in contradiction. What people mean when they tell you to forgive is usually not about you at all. It is about them. It is about making the family gathering workable, making the holiday dinner possible, making their own discomfort smaller. They are asking you to perform a reconciliation so that everyone else can stop choosing sides. That request is understandable. It is also yours to refuse. You do not owe anyone a reconciliation that cost you your peace. You do not owe anyone access to the parts of yourself that were used as a weapon. And you do not have to prove you have forgiven someone by allowing them back into a position where they can hurt you again. Forgiveness, if it comes, is for you. Reconciliation, if it happens, is a separate and optional decision that follows from completely different criteria, chief among them being whether the person who wronged you has actually done the work of understanding what they did and why it was wrong, not whether enough time has passed, not whether they are suffering, whether they have genuinely reckoned with what they chose. The hardest and most necessary thing I have learned in the 16 months since I walked out of my kitchen is this. Rebuilding after a betrayal like this starts with rebuilding trust in your own perception, not in another person, in yourself, in your ability to see what is actually in front of you, in your right to name it, in your authority to act on what you know, even before you can prove it, even before someone else confirms it. Your instincts are not dramatic. They are data. The sentence I kept on my bathroom mirror for almost a year. She used what I gave her out of love. She did not calculate that what I gave her out of love made me strong enough to survive what she did with it. It's been 16 months. I still work cardiac step-down at the same hospital in Charlotte. I got a promotion 8 months ago. Clinical coordinator, a title that comes with more administrative responsibility and a schedule that occasionally allows me to see daylight on a weekday, which I had forgotten was possible. I took it because I had earned it, and because I was ready for it, and because I had spent the better part of a year refusing to let what happened to me become the reason I stopped moving forward. I will not let it be that. I refuse to let it be that. The apartment is mine. I stripped it of everything that felt like a remnant. The particular arrangement of the living room, the coffee mugs, the framed photo I have not looked at and have not thrown away. And I spent one long September weekend making it feel like a place that belonged to me and not to a version of my life I no longer inhabit. I bought a plant, a pothos, from a farmer's market near the hospital. I have kept it alive for 11 months. I water it on Sundays. I consider it evidence that I am capable of sustaining things. Tamara and I have lunch every Thursday when our schedules allow, the kind of standing plan you make when you understand what it means to have someone show up for you and you don't want to take that for granted. Last month, she asked me if I was okay, the way she asks it when she means the real version of the question. I said yes, I meant it. My mother and I talk on Sunday mornings now. It started as a check-in during the hardest weeks and became a habit, and now it is one of the things I organize my week around. She says, "How are you, baby?" And I tell her the truth, which is something I am still practicing. She is on my side without conditions or qualifications, and I do not have adequate words for what that means. I just know that it matters more than almost anything else, and that I am not going to waste it. I don't have a new relationship. I am not in a hurry, for one. I am in the process, slow and deliberate and sometimes frustrating, of learning the difference between being open with someone and handing them a complete map of every vulnerable place inside me. Those are not the same thing. I know that now in a way I didn't before. Openness builds over time, through small acts and consistent presence and accumulated evidence that someone handles carefully what you give them. What I did with Danielle my entire life was not openness built over time. It was an inheritance. I trusted her by default because she had always been there and because I had decided very early on that that was sufficient. It was not sufficient. Learning when it is and when it isn't. Learning to tell the difference between people who earn what I give them and people I simply hand it to because they're close is the most important work I have done in these 16 months. Danielle is in Greensboro. Marcus is in Charlotte, somewhere on the other side of a city large enough that our paths have not crossed in 16 months. And I am here, in my apartment, with my plant, with my rearranged furniture and my Sunday phone calls and my Thursday lunches and my promotion and my own name on my own lease. Type in the comments. I made it out and I know who I am now. Write it for yourself, not for me. Write it because you need to see those words on a screen somewhere and feel them land. And tell me, has someone who should have been your safe place used what they knew about you against you? How did you find your way back to yourself? Write it below, because sometimes the most important thing in the comments section is your story.